my go-to is to go for a run. That's what I do. And that's always been, I'll go outside, I'll leave my phones at home or turn them off, and I'll either go to the gym or go for a run. And that is where I'm able to, kind of like just reflect and kind of ask myself, is it really worth it? Did you need to say it that way? Did you really need to yell, lose your temper? Did you have to yell at the kids and things like that? And then I go back and I make peace and I apologize, Sometimes, let me be honest, sometimes it takes me a few days to apologize because, I'm a little stubborn. But, whenever I feel that rising, I look at my children and I'm like, I don't want them to be distant from me the way I'm distant from my own parents.
Hey guys, welcome back to Inspired by the Inspired podcast. Today we have a very special guest with us, preacher, teacher, and author Lemuel Blackett. Lemuel has just released his latest book, Help I'm Dealing with Trauma, which is a personal, honest, transparent, and dramatic piece of work that drives deep into Lemuel's life. Grown up in a fractured family in London and then New York, Lemuel witnesses trauma and at times was on the brink of self-destruction himself. Throughout the book, Lemuel shares his insecurities, disappointments, and the grief of loss, betrayal, racism, church hurt, and experiences that have left him resistant to letting his guard down. But despite all the challenges, Lemuel shares these stories with such positive energy and gives insight on how to deal with such trauma at a personal level. This book takes the readers on an emotional roller coaster, from the death of his two sisters to the physical abuse that each woman in his family dealt with. Lemuel also talks about his brother's dishonesty and stealing, backstabbing from intimate relationships, and even rumors spreading around churches he preached at. But through it all, Lemuel found his way with the help of his wife and children. And with this book, he finally makes peace with it all. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let's welcome Lemuel Blackett.
Lemuel, thank you so much for joining us on an episode of Inspired by the Inspired podcast.
Thank you for having me. Delighted to be here. How are you guys doing today?
We are doing very good here in Denver, Colorado. You are currently in San Diego, correct?
That is correct. It's nice and warm finally.
Don't brag, okay? It's cold as hell over here, so don't. I will end this podcast
Soaking
real
up
quick.
the heat. Oh, yeah.
I should mention I played golf yesterday?
No, you did not.
Oh, okay. I won't mention it then.
No, mention it. No, yeah, go ahead and mention it. Yeah, absolutely.
We can't talk about golf. That's no go.
Yeah, let's go ahead and mention that real quick. We'll just turn off your video real quick. Go ahead. So I was glad to have you. One of the reasons why I did really want to have you on the podcast is because you currently have a book out. It really goes through a lot of what people probably go through on their everyday life, but they don't really know how to vocalize it. And as a reverend or as a pastor, as a president of your church, you have a very distinguished voice of how to really interpret what it truly means, like internally. So I really want to get into that, but I do want to get into your upbringing and your move to London, your move to New York, and all that kind of stuff before we get into the nitty gritty stuff. Okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
So go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm originally born in London, Southeast London, and it was a dream of my mother's to move to the U.S. And so she told us, that we're getting ready to move to New York. But in my mind, I'm thinking we're moving to California because in the late 80s, you have Knight Rider, you have the A-Team. And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to meet Mr. T. I'm going to meet David Hasselhoff. And so we arrive on a Saturday evening at JFK.
New York, you got mean streets. You got all the complete opposite, the nitty gritty stuff. Yep.
There's some classic hits in New York.
We're driving around. We're driving on the wrong side of the road. People are flipping us the bird. I said, this is not the A-Team. I have been hoodwinked. So, it was a culture shock at first, of course, because, I'm like, these folks have real funny accents and the food does not taste the same. And so it was a very interesting journey. And then, of course, I met my wife, Kimberly, back in 2008. I showed up on her doorstep and I didn't leave until she agreed to marry me. And we have been together almost 13 years, 3 kids later, moved to Connecticut. And now we're in San Diego having the time of our life.
Looks like that persistence paid off.
Yes.
Where did you meet your wife?
I showed up on her doorstep. So I was working for her mother at an organization called Guideposts. It was started by Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, author of Power of Positive Thinking. And I was looking to move closer to the office. And she shared with me, she said, well, my daughter lives in Mount Vernon. The office was in Pauling. So that would have cut down on my drive at least 40 minutes. And, I rang her doorbell. She came downstairs and the rest is like history. I knew her family before I knew her.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was that in New York or was that?
That was in New York, Mount Vernon.
Yeah. Sweet.
Mount Vernon, New York. And what was so funny about that is that she told her mother, because her mother is a preacher as well and pastors 2 churches, United Methodist churches in New York. And she told her mother, I'll never marry a preacher. I'll never marry a pastor. And here I come. And she's like, oh, damn it. He's cute. And I was like, yep, gotcha.
Did she know you were a pastor or a preacher before you?
Yes, she did.
I want to make sure.
Yep. And she was determined not to like me, not to get involved with me. And you see how that played out.
Yeah.
I see you got the charm. You played it well.
That's it.
You went through a couple of rough patches with some exes. So it's really nice to see you come out on top and on top of the world and playing golf and having fun in San Diego while we're in Denver. It snowed yesterday, so I appreciate it.
Yeah.
So this is your 3rd book that we're going to be talking about. And can you walk us through your first 2 books? Just kind of, I know they're more devotional pieces, but it kind of sets the process of how you wrote this 3rd book, especially with talking to your publisher. He tried to get more out of you. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. So as I stated, I worked for Guideposts and I did all of the prayer ministry. So I would travel extensively across the country, different parts of the world, teaching on intercessory prayer. And a lot of folks were like, man, you teach pretty well, you should consider writing a book. So I thought about it for a few years. And then one day I just sat down and wrote out my outline and just started writing. And it was a prayer devotional. And it, for a first-time author, it did pretty well. Every time I would go and preach, the pastors would say, bring your book, our church enjoys you and things like that. So that was good. I was getting my feet wet. And then about a year and a half later, I wrote, I Will Be Effective, just talking about how we could be busy with so many things and have in the world's eyes, I guess, a successful career, but you're not being effective. And so I talked about being effective in relationships and ministry, with your finances, with your children, because one of my mentors told me you could travel all you want to, but don't forget you have a family. And make sure you spend time with them. So that was very important. And so I wrote those 2 books and I worked with David Morris, the publisher at Guideposts. And he left to go work for Zondervan and then eventually went out on his own. And so I kept his email, kept his phone number, and I emailed him. I said, could I send you my 2 devotionals? He said, absolutely. He looked it over. We scheduled a Zoom. And I said, what do you think? And he was like, they were okay. And I was like, I have thick skin. It's all right, man. Tell me what you think. He said, no, really, they are okay. He said, but I just really wish preachers would stop being so surfaced and give us something deep, just be honest. And I said, oh, you want deep? I said, I got you. And I shut down, man, for about 6 months. And every day I would write for about 4 to 5 hours a day. And then back in June of 2020, I flew out to San Diego and stayed in the hotel down in Mission Valley. And every morning I had a routine. I would get up, run, exercise, go to IHOP, then come back to the hotel and write for 5 hours straight. I didn't move. then I will go out and play a little golf and enjoy the sun. But I was really, really determined to focus on this project and get it out. And, now we're here today.
That's awesome. The book that you sent us currently, there's a lot of stuff that's very current in terms of what you talk about. When did you kind of like start the process of writing that one out?
So the trauma book, I started outlining that more like 2021. I started kind of like just outlining and writing. And I started writing that because of some of the stuff that I went through in churches. And, my last church that I was the interim pastor out there in Hartford, Connecticut, after I went through a real mess with them, they were not so nice. And I was like, I kind of have to get this out. And kind of shared it with my therapist. And he was like, do what you need to do to stay healthy. And as I shared with you, it's very cathartic for me to write this project because I've carried so much for so long. And so I just kind of needed to get it out. And it was, when the publisher, David, said, something deep, it was like the floodgates opened, and it's never easy writing, but it became very easy writing this story. I was very comfortable, even the parts where I know people like, did he just say that? Isn't he a minister? Is he supposed to be speaking like that? Yeah, I'm gonna give.
That's what I told you yesterday. Is like you humanize the highest power of the church, because when we talk about pastors and preachers and reverends, like when I went to church, it was like you always held them like on a different regard. Like they were always on a higher stand. They must live great lives, and they must be completely dedicated to the church, and which you are. But it's also you express so much emotion. And like even when I read the first curse word, I was like, "Can he do that? Is he allowed to do that?" But like it showed the emotional side of it. Is like you guys are as people are as emotional and as mentally sometimes unstable as we are. You're dealing with the trauma, you're dealing with tragedies and drama, but you gave it such a voice. You gave that part of the church a voice, and you allowed yourself to kind of open up with every aspect of your life. And to me, I felt like, especially when you're talking about the rumors that were going around and all that stuff, like, you could have left that out and no one would have known about it. But, like you wanted to make sure. It's kind of like you want to say everything so no one can bring it up. It's kind of like, it's you. If someone goes, "Oh, he didn't mention this, I wonder why." But if you just go out and say everything that you need to say in the book, "Hello, I'm dealing with trauma," you gave a voice that needed to be heard. And it was such a delightful read. It's hard to read sometimes, but it was definitely, it let me know exactly like, wow, every single chapter, it was like something. I was like, okay, now he's going to be on the path. He's going to, the positive side, and then something bad happens, and then you're just like, oh my God, how is he dealing with this?
Yeah. It was, when I was writing that piece, I was sharing with a colleague. He said, "Man, you put everything on the table." I was like, "Not really." I said, "I just put a little
coming out."
I was like, I could say so much more, and I will at a later date. But I thought, this is enough to help someone because, several years ago, there started to be a very uptick of clergy taking their lives. And, I found that to be very, very disturbing. I don't know all what they went through and the things they were dealing with in their ministries and in their home. But I was determined not to prematurely leave my family by way of death. And I'm trying to be around as long as I can. And sometimes you have to release all of that stuff that kind of holds you back or prevents you from being your authentic self, your best self for you, for your family, for your friends, and for the things that you are passionate about doing on a day-to-day basis. So thank you for that, accolade. But I'm really hoping that someone heals and is encouraged by the words that I put on paper.
Did you have any moments like during the writing where you're like, well, maybe I shouldn't put this out or shouldn't write this? Because I know even with my own like music in the past,
Mhm.
there's certain things that it can be helpful to talk it out, but sometimes you're
Yeah.
like, I don't know if I should share this level of,
Mhm.
openness in that way. Did you ever
You
had
know
those
what?
kind of?
No, the only time I questioned was when I wrote the things concerning my wife and what she was going through in corporate America, and I went to her and shared with her what I would like to put in, and she took a deep breath and she was like, "Are you changing the names?" I was like, "Honey, I got you. I'm going to change the name."
Company A, B, C, and
Yeah.
D.
Exactly. See, you really read the book,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I said to her, I said, I'm going to change the names. I said, but I think it'll be good for you and it'll be good for us. And funny story, when I got my author copies just before we released it, Kim grabbed a book, sat next to me on the couch, and read it for 3.5 hours. And she was like, "Babe, I really enjoyed this." She said, "But damn, I think I'm going through some trauma because that stuff really pissed me off what I went through at that job."
Absolutely.
She's hard worker. Seems like she keeps
Yeah,
grinding, putting it through. That's awesome to see.
absolutely. Absolutely.
So let's go ahead and go through. I mean, in the beginning of the book, we go through a lot of the trauma with your family.
Mhm.
There, the deaths of your two sisters, the stealing, the robbery of your brothers, the second mortgage taking out with your mom's notice.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and just kind of break that down into individual pieces with your sister, and just kind of how your guys' emotional roller coaster of a relationship. And then
Mhm.
unfortunately, when she passed, you started having all these regrets. You wish your family had better ties, because I mean, I thought my family was a dysfunctional family, but
Right.
you're the way the way your brother acted, the way I mean, just there's a lot of things to go through. But let's go ahead and talk about your emotional relationship and roller coaster with your sister Ray, and let's just
Mhm.
kind of go through there and just kind of how it kind of really started out the book, and how it kind of started out that journey of the trauma outside of the moving aspect.
Yeah. So with my sister Ray, there's probably not a day that goes by that I don't think about her. And there were some really cool times. Unfortunately, our relationship became rocky, and that is because of my mom. They in my family, and it goes back generations, they would pick their favorite child. And that is just so unhealthy. And, I guess she was her favorite because it was a man that she was deeply in love with, who she had this baby by. And so, that was, I guess, her kind of love child, so to speak, for lack of a better phrase. And she kind of knew that. And she was a little fairer than I am, so there was a little colorism in that, and we would just go to town, and my mother would instigate a whole lot of that stuff. So even when I was sharing in the book, when I was kind of misbehaving in school, and she would call me up and insult me, and I would take it year after year, and then that just one time, it was like because of the time difference from England to America, it was like 5 a.m, and she's just berating me on the phone, and I absolutely lose it. I mean, I use all the words you read in the book and probably
Yeah.
some new ones I made up. And,
Mhm.
that was really the beginning of our rocky relationship. And then, moving in with her and being there for that year and what she was going through with that domestic violent piece with her ex-boyfriend, it just worsened from there. We would go to work. And I said to her one time, I said, if only you had that mouth and that energy for that man that whoops your ass, you wouldn't say anything to me. And then, of course, we went straight to the top again.
Yeah.
That's just what it was. So it was sad, that she, got cancer and just continued to get sicker and sicker. And we kind of got better towards the end, but look how much time we wasted.
Yeah.
That was the unfortunate piece, and that's why I share that. Though you go through some tragic things in relationships, do your best. At least you put your best foot forward to try and rebuild. Try to kind of throw the past in the past, leave it there, and try to move forward. And I think that's key. And unfortunately, with all of my siblings, there was just no closure. And
Well,
so
that's
that
why I
happens.
think it's so important to start off with that, sisters, because early in
Yeah,
the book, I think that was really kind of formulated how you looked at relationships in general. Like
yeah,
with when her boyfriend was hitting her, and then it's
hmm
just like everything. It just came like you saw men differently, you saw
yeah,
women differently, you saw relationships differently, you saw like how your mom was treated from her ex boyfriends or ex husband. You
yep.
saw, so you started seeing that. So did you think that kind of outlook on humanity kind of started at that moment where you're like, okay, the world isn't as beautiful or as portraited as in movies as possible? Because I feel like that was the moment where everything kind of changed for you, if that's how the book started.
Absolutely, and that makes total sense because at that point I was like, no one can be trusted. This really is an ugly world, and I may not have articulated that around 10 or 13 years old, but I was like, this is not right, and I just don't believe this is the way people are supposed to treat one another. And it really took a toll on me, and I would never get close to anyone because I would always wait for the ball to drop. And that is something that my therapist helped me to see too, is like, enjoy the good things that are happening now. I was like, man, but I just know they're gonna cheat, they're gonna do this, they're gonna let me down. He said, I want you to free yourself and enjoy these good things that are happening. Your marriage is better, children are healthy, your things are taking off. But in that moment, I became very, very siloed, very resistant to relationships. I do not use the word friendship loosely like others do. If I am your friend, I really am. And you're not allowed to talk about my friend in my presence because we're gonna have a misunderstanding. Because I'm loyal like that. So it really, it shocked me. It was like boom, like I really can't believe all of this is happening, and it's so consistent across the board. So yeah.
Let's just go in and just for the audience purposes of like you going downstairs, you're a young kid, or I don't know if it's downstairs, but you walked in and you saw her getting hit.
Mm-hmm.
So go ahead and like that, like what was the trigger part? What was the kind of thing? Like, what did you do? Obviously I know, but like, what was it like in the moment as a young kid? What were you going through mentally?
So with Ray, I was in the room. I was in my room, and her boyfriend was in their room. And as I
You're looking
stayed,
out the window, right? And then you heard
yes,
the noise.
yeah,
Yeah, you heard the noise.
exactly. I heard the noise.
I
It
feel like a lot
was
of women got hit in this book. So I'm
Yeah,
trying to make sure I get these,
it was
like these
later when you
systems.
were coming down to see your brother. That's when you
that's
saw
Yeah,
it.
correct. That's
yeah.
correct. So I'll go back to Ray and then to my sister-in-law. So Ray, I was people watching, heard the noise. I was like, oh, that's probably nothing. They're probably just playing around as couples do, because that's where my mind went. And then I
Mhm.
started hearing the crying and the screaming, the yelling, and I had no idea what to do. And I was in straight panic mode. And so I wrote the note, held it up to a window, and a lady walked by, and I threw it out the window, and she
She called
grabbed
out.
it, read it, and called the police.
Yeah.
And he came, two police officers came, and she answered the door and denied it, and then came into the room a few hours later and just laid with me. Now, what I did not put in the book is that she saw the other note that I wrote and got upset with me. And I was like,
Mm.
are you kidding? And she's like, why did you write this? I said, why did you let him hit you?
Yeah.
I said, why did you do that? I said, and again, we never dealt with the issue. We went to the top. It became a fight with my sister-in-law. I was much younger. Must have been 5 or 6 years old. And I was coming downstairs to get something to drink. And I could see it as clear as day, even right now. Fireplace, she's on the floor. He's holding her by her blouse and he's punching her in the face.
Mm.
And I am in complete shock. I am in shock, fear, despair, all the emotions, angry. And I run back up, in bed with my nephew, PJ. He's like 2 years younger than me. And we just go to sleep because I could have swore this is a nightmare. But when
Yeah.
I saw her the next day, she was crying, face is messed up. And I said, I want to go home. I want to go home. And he was like, you'll go home when I said, I want to go home now, right now. And he had no other choice but to take me home. And, I guess he was like, what did you see last night? And I had nothing to say because I had lost all respect for him. Now, I didn't know what that was, but I know I was pissed. And I wanted him to feel what my sister-in-law felt. And it just was not right. And, then as a kid, my mother tells me what I did to my dad, but I sure wish I had that energy for my brother and my sister's boyfriend, because they would have got it.
I mean, I get that. I had similar situations between my own stepdad and my mom. There was times where those moments kind of arose, and it's like, thinking back on it now, it's like I kind of wish I had that courage to kind of step in. But of course, I'm only like 12 years old, and I'm looking at a dude who's in his 40s. So that's a whole other aspect in itself. So I definitely connected with that.
So didn't your sister, because I know your mom went through roughly around the same, I mean, at least verbal abuse from her ex-boyfriends, right? Her ex-husband. He was, did she see that? Because did she think that like that was like the normality of what being in a relationship is?
Had to, because her father would hit my mom.
Right.
And I wasn't born yet. And my mother, after a while, she didn't take it anymore and fought back. I mean, she went to town on him, as the story is told. And this is not my mother telling me the story. This is other people like, your mom got sick and tired of being hit, and she went to work. And when my mom told me, it was like word for word from what I heard from other people. And so that's, like you said, that is what she thought was normal. Yeah. And I've never thought that was normal at all. That just has never seemed right to me. Putting your hands on a woman to abuse her. No, man, I don't do that. I hate it. I despise it.
Yeah, especially a lot of people's upbringing or their religious beliefs or even their culture, especially like leaving someone or divorcing someone or is like out of the question. So how long was she staying there while the abuse was happening? Was it like, because I know in the book, it wasn't just overnight. It was, she kind of woke up and realized she was like, I'm done. I don't want to deal with this. But how long was it kind of towards that, the first, or I don't know if that was the first hit, but how long was it going on before she decided to leave him?
You talking about my sister?
Right. Your sister, yeah.
I'm not really sure, but I must have been in my early 20s. And she told me that he came in and he went to strike her. And she grabbed a butcher knife. And she said, I wish you would. She said, today's the day you will die. And she said, he's never been back ever since. And what was so weird, let me tell you this is how toxic this was. He owned a store in a little town in London where they have all of like the street vendors, like the farmers market. So they have that in London as well. And he would sell underwear, clothing, fruit, all of that. And she would still go there and get her stuff. And when I would visit London, she was like, let's go and see Frankie. I'm like, I don't see that punk. I know what he did to you. And she's like, no, it's all good now. All good. I said, you taking this fool back? She was like, no, I'm not taking him back. I was like, okay, so you would see me and call me by my middle name. Hey, Tris. I'm like, hey, I'll be down here.
That was definitely the edited version because you went ham on a lot of people. You motherfucker, piece of shit. Like you went ham on it.
Exactly.
That's why I bring up these individual, like with your sister, and we're going to talk about your brother and your mom. But it's like you were a minister, a rev, like you're the highest of the church later on in life. It's like you're dealing with all of this type of thing. So you have this ability when you talk to people that ask for comfort or ask for that need information or need, advice, like you already went through majority of this, whether if it was about racial content, was it about rumors going around the church, like you've gone through so much. So starting off with your family, like it kind of built this barrier, this bridge, this wall around people. Like you should be in the moment of your life where you don't want to talk to anybody. Like you should have a wall around yourself. But yet with the church and your belief in God and you believe in you even what I love and we will talk about this later on is how you differentiate Christians and church people. So we'll definitely talk about that because I think that's a huge thing when it comes into a lot of people would never say. But
that first sentence caught me off guard. He's like, where you fully dove into like the differences. You're like, church people are the worst. I was like, oh my, what's going on? But yeah, no, we'll get to that. But it definitely, that was an interesting take on it that I totally agree with. Yeah.
So when it comes into the relationship with your mom, we'll start off with, we'll go to her next, because that's kind of the foundation of how your upbringing is and how you looked at people. And because you weren't necessarily, I don't know if you consider, obviously Ray was the favorite, but you were the most, I think, logical. I think probably you were the most emotional because it was coming from your words, but I felt like you needed to go through all this in order to find yourself later on in life. So, but I think your mom was kind of, you had a roller coaster relationship with your mom too, because you did say that she kind of instigated a lot of your relationships with your brother and your sisters. But where was the fine line when you started realizing where, like because she got hurt a lot. So I do want to talk about her trauma with her, because unfortunately she had to go through a lot of it, which eventually the reason why you don't talk to your brother, or don't know where he's at, and you ended up relationships with your sisters kind of rough, but she was the foundation of everything. So let's go ahead and talk about her and the struggles that she went through as her life that you saw on the outside.
Yeah. And it, like I said in the beginning, a lot of this stuff is generational, because my mother's oldest sister just passed last year. It's been about a year that she just passed. And my mother's oldest sister was my grandmother's favorite. And she would do terrible things to my mother, because my grandfather died when my mom was around 13 years old. And my aunt would call my mom a whore. She would cook food and deliberately not feed my mom. She would hide things from her. She would steal things from her. And my mother would share this with her mom. And she would just say, oh, that's just Dorothy, blah, blah, blah. And this would piss my mother off, to where on my grandmother's deathbed, she told my mother that she apologized, and that, she never meant to hurt her. And that, I've come to realize that Dorothy, she's kind of like, I know Dorothy's a bitch and all this other stuff. And she's like, I love you. I'm telling you, man, these folks, I love them, but Jesus Christ. And she was like, I hope you can forgive me. And my mother shared me. She said, well, they both were crying. And she was like, I forgive you. I've always loved you. You're my mother. And that was that. So we fast forward a little bit to my upbringing. We would go into it all the time. I mean, my mother and I, there was just there was no comfort level. It was either hot or it was either cold. There was no in between. There's in between now because she's older and I take care of her. But when I was growing up, it was pretty rough. And she would share a lot of what I would tell her to my siblings. And that started with trust issues. I don't share. I don't tell anything, because I'm afraid it's going to come back in a way that, I didn't tell the story. It's going to be ad libs. People don't play telephone right,
Right.
And she would share my business. Now I understand that, even parents kind of go through their children's room and, make sure everything is copacetic. I get that. I'm a parent. But my mother would take it to the extreme. She would flip over the bed, take the drawers out the dresser, throw the clothes on the floor. And then I would come in and I would see it. And I was like, what happened? Did we get robbed? She was like, clean it up. And I was like, I'm going to fucking kill this lady. I'm going to prison, and it was just intentional, just digs and digs and digs, and saying, more favored Ray, more favored Patrick, all these people. And those are the ones that are not around. Those are the ones that probably would have put her in a home already. And so I'm the one left to kind of like take care of her now. But it was pretty tough. We would go months without talking. We went almost 2 years. I didn't say a word, and I had nothing to say. And my wife asked me, aren't you going to call my mother? I was like, no, I'm not going to call her. I said, I'm not a kid anymore. And I don't have to apologize for something I have not done. And I said, it's just not going to happen. I said, when she's ready, she'll call. And she said, well, aren't you afraid, something's going to happen to her? I said, heaven ain't ready and hell don't want her. I said, nothing's going to happen.
What year is it when you guys had this conversation? When you guys had
God, this was 2013 when my wife and I had conversation. And we were going through, and even as most recent as a few weeks ago, though I'm taking care of her, she was acting up. I was like, dude, you're old. You should be sweeter.
Yeah.
Like, enjoy life. You're in Cali, you have your grandchildren, but it was very tumultuous. It was very, very tumultuous. Very
she went through a lot too. Like even her brothers, like, man, for like where she went from London to New York, and then they didn't want to making sure I get the names right. It's so many bad things happen in this about, he didn't want to give her money, but Manfred said that I'm going to buy you, or I guess she gave him money, right? Correct. Yeah, to get his ticket. And then when she had to go by, he wanted money back from her. So like she gave him money for the flat, I think it was. And then when she
gave him money for his boat ride from Guyana to London. And then when it was her turn to come, he said, I'm going to loan you the money.
Right. And then as soon as she got there, she was like, I'm gonna need that money back. Because I felt like I was like, oh man, he's finally a good guy. Like he's like, I'm gonna help you out, I'm gonna do good. And then he asked for the money back. And then she got a job immediately. He was kind of like on her for a long time, like, where you been, where you going. They go to the party. She's living life, she's doing good, and then she looks out, like the way he pays, and sees there's a mark on the coin, and she realizes he's stealing from her. And then her other brother's like, don't give her any money, don't help her. So it's like that's just her own family. Like even when her son Patrick, and then Deborah, when they steal or when they take out the second mortgage on the home. So like I completely get where she is in life. I get where she's at from my perspective. But go ahead and like I do want to go in with that second mortgage, like that type of moment when Patrick and Deborah decided to take out or go behind her back and take out money. Like what was that type of conversation like when it comes into family gatherings?
Well, there was no family gatherings. Trust me, there was no reunions. Yeah. Only time we came together when someone died, and even that was like, oh my gosh, just go home. Let's just bury our loved one and go. But they when we found out about it, my mother was completely distraught. She was completely distraught, and she had to go through and prove that was not her signature. The way
were they trying to sell the house? Is that what it was? Yeah, they were trying to sell it, and they were like, "You didn't pay off you didn't pay off the whole house," and they're like, "We paid off the first mortgage." So go ahead.
So she had paid off the house, and she had left the paperwork with my older siblings. In the event something happened to her, then we would split and all that other foolishness. And so what they did was, they went out, took out a second mortgage. So after my mother paid that final note, they was like, where's the deed? And they was like, well, you haven't finished the second mortgage. She was like, there is no second mortgage. And, they started comparing dates and all this other stuff when she came into the bank. And she's like, what are you talking about? I was in the US. I was in New York. And she was a nurse at that time. So she literally was assisting a doctor. At the time of the transaction, she was assisting a doctor delivering a baby. That's how crazy it was. And it's like, no, two of them could not have happened at the same time.
Yeah.
And she had to fly back and forth, see lawyers, and eventually they released the house and then put out a warrant for him so that he could pay back that money, because it was a couple of £100,000.
So go ahead and talk about it. So what happened? So like for the readers or for people who don't know yet, so you realized who decided to who took the second mortgage out?
So it was my brother that took the second mortgage out.
Your brother and your sister, correct?
And so he brought in my other sister, Deborah. And so because my mother and Deborah favor, they were able to sign and use her face so that they were able to sign all of the paperwork and take out the money. And it was very easy back then. And they did it. It was so slick, that no one knew for years. No one knew anything. None of us knew anything.
And the best part is Patrick did it to her. Patrick did it to Deborah. Yeah. So exactly. It's like, oh man.
Yeah. And when he did it, he went in as her husband. So back then you could go in and say, well, I'm taking out this mortgage. You don't need your wife. But as to today, I can't sell my house without Kimberly. We have to be present together. Back then, you could do that. So he's probably the reason why no one could do it by themselves anymore.
Yeah, they changed it all because of him.
Exactly.
Step authorization to do that now. But yeah, that's
It was terrible. And he turned around and did it to her, and she almost lost everything. She had to go and prove. And it's just this ongoing vicious cycle of trying to ruin your sibling or ruin your loved one, all for greed. And for the
Yeah.
life of me, I just don't get it. I really don't. I
I
wish
know
I had that.
you mentioned like a lot of toxic traits that kind of come from your family and through the
Yeah.
upbringing.
Mhm.
In like moments currently with your own wife and kids, do you ever find those like kind of rising? What do you do to like put a stop to those, or what if like values you've kind of changed to better present yourself?
Yeah, so number one, therapy was a good thing, even though Kim and I did argue about it. I was one of those persons, black folk don't go to therapy. We got Jesus. And
She
that's,
for it and you against it?
huh?
Was she for it and then you were against it in the
Right.
initial like, argument?
Exactly. Yeah, I was totally against it. And then she was like, "Honey, you really need help." And she's like looking at me, tears in her eyes, like you got to get control of yourself. So Kimberly has never, first of all, she never grew up around physical abuse, and I've never abused her either. But whenever I felt the rage coming, or if we would get into an argument, or the children are just being loud, my go-to is to go for a run. That's what I do. And that's always been, I'll go outside, I'll leave my phones at home or turn them off, and I'll either go to the gym or go for a run. And that is where I'm able to, kind of like just reflect and kind of ask myself, is it really worth it? Did you need to say it that way? Did you really need to yell, lose your temper? Did you have to yell at the kids and things like that? And then I go back and I make peace and I apologize. Sometimes, let me be honest, sometimes it takes me a few days to apologize because, I'm a little stubborn.
Absolutely.
But, whenever I feel that rising, I look at my children and I'm like, I don't want them to be distant from me the way I'm distant from my own parents.
Gotcha.
And so I instead of yelling and talking at them, we talk with them. And now they're so comfortable. I tell you this funny story. My daughter, she sees a therapist and she's doing really well. And she was telling her little brother, my wife is driving, she's telling her big brother rather, she's like, "Brendan, I'm going to see a therapist." And he's like, "A therapist? What?" She's like, "A therapist." And he's like, "What is a therapist?" And she's like, "Someone that you could just share all your problems with, and they won't tell anyone unless something bad is going to happen to you. And they just kind of, help you." And he was like, "Wow." He said, "Lord knows I need a therapist." So now I was like, "What, does the whole house need therapy?" So it's kind of cute just to see this and to see them interact, but to also let them know there are other outlets other than me. Though I wish you would come to me with everything. I'm glad that you have this outlet that you could share, you could be yourself, and that, after and my daughter read my book, she's 10, and she was like, "Dad, I'm so glad that you see your therapist. I'm glad I'm seeing mine," and things like that, because what she was going through, I was going through at 10. I had no therapist. I had no one to talk to. There was no one. I didn't even know about God. I'm just like, who can I talk to? So I'm glad that she has that. So I try to be better for them.
Well, I assume writing the book itself is therapy because it's kind of like getting everything on a piece of paper, revisiting things that you did, things that they did, kind of seeing it. Did you feel any different after writing the book about your family or any of the tragedies that you went through? Did you kind of look at it differently? Did it change your mind at all?
I would say that it was tough for me to write about the grief,
Mhm.
and to be honest, I would really get upset whenever I had to reread it or do some edits. It
Mhm.
would really anger me, like, because there was no closure.
Mhm.
And I think that's the thing that really upset me. I even told David, I said, "I don't mind going through these edits and getting your opinion." I said, "But I want to talk about the domestic violence piece and the grief. I want to get that out of the way, because reliving it and rereading it is messing with me. And I need to take a step back." So like we literally did that first, read it over, put it to bed, and then we went on with the rest of the chapters, because it was just really hard for me to come to grips with how all of this transpired. And I still I'm not close with my family at all, any of them. And even I love my mom, we just kind of have good casual conversation, laugh when we can, but I'm very distant from my family.
Do you know if any of one of them have read the book?
I have no idea.
That's a topic on its own right there. I'd love to see Patrick and your mom was like, wait a minute, what did he say about me?
Right. He's like, that's not true. I'm like, yeah, bro, it is. It is.
What would you say? Let's just before we move on from outside the family aspect of it, what would you say to a person or people listening, or if someone came up to you dealing with family trauma, dealing with domestic abuse, dealing with insecurities, or dealing with relationship issues? What are some of the advices as a minister, or as a reverend, or as a person itself who's been through all of it? What are some of the advices that you can give them that can kind of bring them out of that injustice, or bring them out of that type of situation?
Yeah. So with the domestic violent piece, I would definitely say, call the authorities, be that pest. And because it is not safe for the person that is being abused, and it's going to take a toll on you mentally if you don't share what is going on, because you will start living with regret. When I wrote the note and threw it out the window, I don't regret any of that, because it had to stop when the police showed up. He had to calm down. She had to leave the room. So I would say keep sharing that and encourage the person that is being abused to seek help, because they need it more than anything. And we don't always have the answers, but a professional will be able to guide them in that right direction in a way that will be beneficial for their mind and for their spirit. For people that are, going through in their family, you can't choose your family. So, you do the very best that you can to try and reconcile. But if you have seen that, you just have that family member that's just going to be completely unreasonable, it's okay to love them from afar. It's okay to remove yourself and say, listen, if you ever need me, if I'm able to do it, I'll do it. But for us to have that close relationship that I would desire would not be healthy for me. And it's okay to be selfish. It's okay to take care of yourself. And for those that feel stuck and are trying to wondering which way are you going to go, what I found key is writing down what I want to do and where I want to go next. It may not happen instantaneously, but it will happen. I give you this quick story. I flew back to New York a few weeks back just to check some things on our house out there before we sell it. And I saw an index card that said, I will move my family to San Diego before December 31st, 2021. It happened 4 months prior. And so I believe you could really will yourself out of things, and that you could keep repeating it over, keep working towards it, track your progress, and you will be surprised at the amount of things that you could accomplish and how far you could go in life. And you don't have to stay in the toxic environment. Remove yourself. And it really is it's easier done than said, because we could just keep saying, but you just have to do it. Yeah. Just do it. Remove yourself. It might be a blow to you, but sometimes it's a calculated process. You got to sit down and figure out where you're going next. But once you know and you have the means to get there, I would tell anyone go afraid, go nervous, just go. Because I wasn't skipping to California. I was excited, but I was scared as hell. And I'm glad I'm here.
Yeah. It's awesome to see your energy, because it's easy to read like through your book and hear about your life and see like, okay, his life, it's easy to think like he would lead down a just dark and terrible path and just not really do anything for himself. What kind of like led you towards like seeing God as your way out, or learning in those type of ways, kind of taking more of that light highbrow?
Yeah. So, I would, there were dark moments. I would say there were some moments where I would drink myself to sleep, smoke myself to sleep, and wake up and wonder, all right, am I going to let this thing consume me, or am I going to be better than what is around me? And what I notice is that I've seen people that have gone through tragedy, and it is unfortunate, but they have allowed it to dictate to them and to rule them. And I was determined I'm not going to let all those horrible things stop me from being successful. You know, I may not have 1 million followers, but I got 3 little people at home that love to follow me. And when I come home, they are excited when I get there. And, you know, even before I had children, I knew I wanted them. I knew I wanted a wife that was going to be supportive. It was going to be a friend where I could share things with and they wouldn't throw it in my face. And I have that. And you have to work towards it because, you know, when I was going through many of these things like 20 years ago, you know, you see how fast 20 years has gone by. You know, I'm like 44 years old. So time waits on no one. It doesn't wait on anyone. So you have to kind of like, not to sound churchy and cliche-ish, but you have to be in a hurry to get yourself together. And
Nothing
so
you've said in this book or in person is churchy, so don't worry about it. You don't have to.
Yeah. And so you know, you just have to believe and get yourself going. You don't have to stay where you are. You really don't. You know, I've thought about all what people did, but I was like, you know what? I'm not going to have this pity party. I'm going to keep pushing forward. I'm not going to sit here and let you win. And then when I make it, I'm still not going to brag about it. I'm just going to enjoy it.
So did you use alcohol and smoking as like kind of like an outing, like kind of like a depressant? Did you use it to kind of deal with your trauma, or was it just kind of something that you gradually started doing more of, or how much of an impact did it have on your life?
It was big because when I was dealing with all this stuff, me and my best friend, who is still my best friend, we would go out and just get high in school. We would be high every day. I would come home drunk every single day from school. And one night I came in 1 o'clock and my mother opened up the door and she said to me, she said, just take yourself to bed. And I remember this clearly. I was drunk. I pointed at her. I said, you take yourself to bed. And I stumbled up the stairs. And that's what was my coping mechanism: drinking, smoking, then the girls. And so just having sex and doing all that stuff.
Well, we're going to get into the girls, so don't worry about it.
Yes.
We're gonna
I was just doing that. So
I feel like
yeah,
every chapter, I was like, oh, he met someone. Oh, there she goes. Oh, he met someone. There she goes.
Yep.
So let's go ahead and jump into that. So you kind of have this family trauma going on. You're a lot of things are going on in your head. You see a lot of things at home, how they're dealing with, how your family are dealing relationships with, you know, because it's not even just the first time, because when Ray got hit, then you have Patrick hitting his girlfriend, like when you walked into him and seeing him. So you have this pre-notion of like how relationships are dealt. It's kind of, I would imagine that's the only type of relationship that you see is the ones inside your family, other than maybe, let's say, a movie or whatever. So you have this pre-notion of this is how it's dealt with. So when you start going after girls and you start building relationships, what are you going through? Because like when you really like someone and then going off your first girlfriend, you start seeing that distrust or that dishonesty, or even your friends, you know, the guy who made a bet with you, I can steal your girl for $20. It's like you are going into the motion of like you're bringing your family outside, and now it's affecting your relationship with your friends and you know, girlfriends. And so first of all, let's go over some of the topics in the book about your first girlfriend that you had. I don't know if it was the first, but I know it was one of the girlfriends that you had. And then that type of distrust and dishonesty was going on. So let's talk about that and then what you were going through and in your head.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of our podcast. We hope you're enjoying the content, you know, finding it informative and entertaining. But if you're looking for more, be sure to check out the video version of this episode on our YouTube channel as well. You know, we have lots of great content. So be sure to subscribe, hit that notification bell, stay up to date on all of our latest releases. And again, thank you for listening. Now we'll get back to the show.
Yeah. So with one of the girls, you know, they were, you know, I was really falling for, and you know, we met at this party and we were talking and having a great time, and you know, I'm assuming things are going very well. And come to find out, she was messing with a close buddy of mine. And I wasn't sure, but I kind of had a thought. I was like, just something, just something's just not right. And when I look at it, it wasn't love; it was more lust. This was just a physical attraction. But anyway, at that time, I thought it was love, and I just noticed the patterns, her kind of like withdrawing herself, kind of pushing me off, and I was just wondering what was going on. And then I kind of share in the book, like, you know what? Even though I'm doing all this stuff, I'm still going to pray. And I was like, let me pray about this. And literally that night, I like have the weirdest vision of her sleeping with someone else, but I know that person is not me. Then the very next day, I see her coming out of the office, and I'm like, dude, what are you doing? And she's like, I'm not going to get into it with you, Lamb, and kind of like walks off. And I grab her arm, and I feel the rage. I feel it. And she kind of looks at me, and I kind of go blank a little, I kind of like see red, and I let her go. I let her go because I never wanted to replicate what I saw. Never wanted to do that. And, she kind of goes off yelling and screaming, and I walk away. And then the person walks by and is like, dude, what's going on? I'm like, hey, ain't nothing going on. We should not be talking right now. And I head home. And that was kind of like the catalyst for all of these other relationships that just kind of failed. Because when I started looking at these other women, I kind of like saw her. And as I stated earlier, I was like, it's like I'm just waiting for the ball to drop. I'm just waiting for this thing to mess up, But with my first girlfriend, when I was like 14, 15 years old, that was traumatic in itself because, as I stated, I really had no one to talk to, and she was the one that I would consistently talk to. So to lose her over a bet, I just could not believe it. Like, what is wrong with me? And that was the question for years. What is wrong with me that people feel they have a right to treat me this way? And that's what I could not answer.
Yeah. So you really like this girl. You're a guy that you didn't like, I guess, you guys were Sheila. I guess you guys kind of met through Sheila. And then the guy, I guess, was it Travis? Travis, yeah. So you didn't like him, first of all. He was giving googly eyes at your girlfriend, and then he came up to you and said, I can steal your girl for $20. And you were like, she'll never fall for a bum like you, so go ahead and give your best shot. Next day you come on in, and then he's there talking, and then she kind of gets real distant. I think you went through, to the dentist, correct? So you have Novocaine, your mouth is swollen. You don't look the best part. So you're coming in trying to give her a kiss. She kind of sways away. We need to talk. And then the worst part about it is when she does break up with you, you leave, he comes out and says, where's my money? Where's my $20? So you're full of rage. You're already going through the trauma with that. You're already medicated, so like you're doped up as it is. So like you wanted to beat the shit out of them. Like there's many times in this book where you just want to use your force. You want to beat the shit out of everybody you meet. I think you even go at it, don't you?
We do.
Because you didn't say it was a fist fight, but you say we go at it. So that's why I was like, was it a physical fight that you guys went through, or was it?
Yeah, we went to work. Yeah, and my friend David came out. Sheila came out, and they was like grabbing me and grabbing him, and I'm cursing, I'm yelling, I'm like, I'm gonna take your friggin' head off. I'm like, yo, I'm gonna kill this dude. And they was like, yo, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. I was like, you know what? Fuck her, fuck him. I'm out. I'm done. Well,
it pissed me off. She says it's better off this way, and you're just like, what the fuck? What does that even mean?
Exactly. And I'm steaming, and I'm just going home, and that was really just the beginning of just like these terrible relationships, and then me taking it out on women, not hitting them, but just like, if I'm not in it for the relationship, I'm just, if we sleeping together, then that's it.
You said I'm in it for the sex. I was like, one or two times and I'm done. So it's like, now you have this relationship status where it's like you don't even look at women the same way. You don't look at your family the same way. You're going through a transformation, like pretty much midlife crisis. You're not even the midlife yet. So you're going through a crisis at such a young age. what kind of brought you out of that? What kind of made you see? I know obviously your current wife is one of the huge part of how you look at women now, but was she it, or was there something where you kind of started adapting a realization that not all women are bad, not all women are mischievous, not all friends are bad, because you had some, even your close friends kind of go mistrustworthy. So where's that stepping line where you're like, okay, you started meeting new people, started, liking new people, starting meeting a girl that you like? What was that transformation like where you started realizing that you can trust certain people?
Yeah, it really started with Kimberly. It started with my wife. It did not start with any other woman because they were always in it for something. And so just to give you a little history, when in the African American church, if you are a popular minister, as I was on the East Coast and tri-state area, it's a little bit south, they want to marry a minister because they think it's limelight, they think it's money and all this. Dude, trust me, I did not get paid that much, Pastor Joe. I took the checks that had my name on it, and it was not a lot.
See that right there. But you're one of the few, because I've seen what ministers look like. I've seen what pastors and preachers, and I've seen them driving very, very nice cars. You even said to yourself that one of the ministers was driving sports cars, and you're like, how is he paying? How is he making all this money? How is he driving these new cars? So, I mean, that is a pre-notion of like even how I see it too. Like, but those are the people you hear of because they're pieces of shit. Like you don't hear the people who truly care about their audience. They truly care about their church, truly care about God. So it is a pre-notion of saying that, oh, this is what it's like to date a minister. I'm going to be set for life.
Yeah. And that was definitely not the case, but they were in it for, oh, this is at that time, Minister Black, he's traveling, blah, blah, blah. He dresses nice. I'm like, dude, I work in a warehouse. I go to school and I'm trying to do what I got to do to make my life. And when I noticed that's what they were in it for, again, I just withdrew myself. Mm-hmm. When I met Kimberly, we went out on a date, and I'm going to tell you where my whole perspective changed. I came back. I told her I want to go out with you when I come back from Maryland from preaching. And I called her up and I was like, hey, you want to go out to eat? And so we went out to Applebee's, and we're laughing and we're talking.
Big time.
Big time. And I tell people I took her to the best restaurant in town, Applebee's, baby. 2008, I'm loaded.
I believe it.
And so we go out to Applebee's and we're laughing, we're talking. And, I call for the check, and she goes into her purse to give me $20. And I'm like, what are you doing? And she's like, I just want to pay my part. And I kind of sit back. I was like, oh.
She's the one.
She's it. I was like, no. I said, put that away. I said, I got this. I got you. And so from there, it just got better and better. I was like, wow, this is amazing. When Ray passed away, what let me know I was going to marry this woman is that she called me up. She was like, be at the airport at 10 o'clock. I was like, be at what airport? I was like, honey, I'm preparing for Ray's service. I said, I can't get you from JFK or whatever. She's like, no. I need you to meet me at Heathrow Airport. I was like, why? She's like, I'm coming to London to support you and your mom. And I was like, oh, I'm done looking. I'm finished. This is it. This is it. This is it. This is who I want. She was unemployed. Her parents gave her the money for the ticket, and she stayed with me for 3 weeks and was right there holding me up. And I was just like, you know what? No, she's the only one. And that's when my perspective came, my first date with Kimberly. And it changed from there.
Yeah, because she was very supportive along even the journeys that, like the struggles you would face from church to church to church, deciding whether, you should keep pushing with this or not. Because even that's an interesting aspect in itself. Some of those churches, I'm curious how you stayed motivated to keep going, because at certain points, you're being labeled a pedophile, you're being, getting bigotry towards being possibly gay. Mm-hmm. You're getting families that control majority of this church, and they're trying to, run their own agendas and kick you out. It's like, I was wondering like how you just kept staying motivated to keep going, keep pushing, keep trying.
We'll
You
go
know,
through that. So go through that motion. So we'll
Yeah.
go off of, let's go into your church experience first, like where you got into the church, and then let's go into those rumors. And because I think it kind of sets the boundary of setting the scene for people of where you started, where you're going, you're at your highest peak, you're the president of the church, and then bad shit starts happening. So we'll go for how you're starting to get into the church atmosphere, and then we'll start going into the nitty gritty stuff.
So I got into the church because I joined this community choir, and you know, they were singing, they were moving, they were kind of grooving. It was a young person's choir. I was like, this is kind of cool. And you know, I was like, all right, but I don't want any of those crazy people jumping up and speaking in that weird language sitting next to me. Lo and behold, the first time we go out to sing together, someone jumps up and starts spitting, foaming at the mouth. I'm like, what the hell is this? But the singing part was fun. And so I'm getting with the program. We're traveling, singing. And at that time, I know nothing really about God, that just he's in heaven and that's it. And so I go through that process, and then we attend this particular church where I was baptized and licensed to preach and all. And I attend this church, and I really enjoy the pastor. And, you know, he's preaching heaven or hell, and that scared the hell out of me. I was like, well, I'm going to get my life together. I'm going to join. And I joined this church, you know, 16 years old, 16, 17 years old. I joined. I get really involved, and I'm having a ball. He dies, and then his son takes over. And I'm getting more involved, and I'm feeling this call to ministry, to speak, to empower people, just to really encourage them. And, you know, I go through the process, get licensed. Not everyone is excited about me being a licensed minister. And then all of the young people are gravitating to me. All of the parents just are gravitating to me because we have skating parties. We go bowling. We go on trips. We go laser shooting, all of that. Laser tag, that's what it is, laser tag. We're having a ball. We're having youth services, and the youth are paying attention. So you have this lady that is pissed because she's not getting any attention. And so she shares with one of the parents, you know, be careful with Brother Blackett because he might end up trying to sleep with one of your sons. So my pastor calls me into the office, and he was like, you know, we're hearing these rumors that you're sleeping with some of the young men. And I'm like, excuse me? I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? And so, you know, he says, you know, that's, you know, a real dangerous offense. I said, dangerous offense? If I did that, where are the cops? If I did anything, I'm like, who said that?
Did they ask any of the kids? Did they ask like
They did. They asked the young men. They was like, how is Brother Blackett around you? They was like, he's fine. They was like, he's the funniest guy I know, you know? And they was like, well, has he ever touched you? And they was like, well, what do you mean? And they just came out. It was like, has he ever tried to have sex with you? They was like, absolutely not. They was like, you do know he has a girlfriend, right? And that, you know, we may not have met her, but we always catch him talking to her on the phone, and that he doesn't get down like that. He has never touched us or tried to convince us to have sex with him or any of that stuff. They was like, no, you're wrong. As a matter of fact, it got so bad that one of the grandparents called my mother, and she was like, I thank God for your son because my grandson wants to say grace at the table and wants to come to Bible study. So I was wondering where all this was coming from. And it got so bad that he was like, well, you know, I'm gonna have to remove you from the youth ministry. I said, are you removing me because I'm guilty, or are you removing me because of optics? And he couldn't answer the question. I said, just answer the question. I said, because either one, I'll be able to tell what kind of guy you are. And I said, because you've never thought of this thing about me before. Why now? You know, and it was a real tough time. And we kind of like went back and forth and argued. And he was like, you know, I'm the pastor here. And I was like, I know, it's on the bulletin, it's on the church bus, and it's on the building. And he was like, well, I'm pastor of this church. And I said, fuck you and your church. And I walked off and I left. And I was good
too, just because you're like all that trauma that you went through as a kid. So like you're trying to making sure these kids don't have the same trauma experience, you know, like they have a chance to go with God or go with church as a way of reconciling and, you know, dealing with their trauma. And yet someone's bringing trauma and making it even worse. So who knows who they replaced you with? And, you know, maybe they don't have the same love for for the youth or love for God. So like they could have pretty much just ruined those kids' lives just off the bat.
Well, they did, because half of them left. Half
Hmm.
of them left because they were, I always tell them, please do not come to church for me. Come to church for God, because you want to have a better relationship and you want to learn. And if I could help you in that, that's awesome. Or if you think someone else could do a better job, that's great too, But a lot of them left, it wasn't the same, and I did go back about a year, 2 years later, and I gave a BS apology because at that time I felt really lost. And I didn't know where to go or what to do. So I figured this is probably the only church that will take me. So I went back and went through like a humiliating time of not speaking, preaching, kind of like blackballed me in the community and things like that. And then after the final time in 2007, I was like, I'm done with this. When he promised, so in the church, in the Black Baptist church, in certain denominations in the Baptist, you kind of get a license to preach, like a certificate, and then you go to school, you earn your degree, and then you get ordained so that you could eventually pastor your own. And he kept promising ordination and just kept lying and lying. I was like, you know what? I'm done. You've been holding this over my head for years now. I was like, I'm finished. And then I just move on from there. I start at Guideposts. I'm like excelling like crazy, traveling everywhere, speaking at some of my hero preachers' churches, folks I would see on television. I'm now being invited to speak there. Things are well. Then I got called to my first church where I'm the senior pastor. And I'm thinking everything is well. Then you got this family, you got these deacons that just want to be in charge. And I'm like, what is it? And then I believe I shared this too. Someone had passed away and I was going to the hospital. And I go to the hospital and the nurse comes out and I say my name and she kind of sizes me up, looks me from head to toe. And I was like, is there something wrong? And she was like, no, one of the deacons said I would probably know who you are before you say your name. I said, well, why would you know who I am before I say my name? And she said, oh, well, he would be dressed like a faggot. And I was like, what? I was like, what? I said, and I kind of looked at it, I said, so am I dressed like a faggot today? And she was like, no, you're not. And I said, I don't even find that language funny at all. I was pissed. And I'm not, mind you, I got to go ahead and pray with this grieving family. And I want to take this fucking deacon's head off and hand it. I'm like, in Jesus' name, let me talk to you. Yep. Let's have a conversation, Mm-hmm. And this was just the beginning of them doing these things. And what kept me there was for the love of teaching God's word and empowering people. But at the same time, those people that I was empowering, they weren't even standing up for me. So I'm dealing with people that really hate me for whatever reason, dealing with people that won't intervene at the right time. And now it's all on me. And then I go back to the drinking. That was my coping. I'm sleeping maybe 3-4 hours a night. And it came to a point where I was just like, you know what? I'm done. And when they called me up for a meeting, I was like, I'm not coming to any meetings. I said, you do whatever you want to do. I'm going to be there Wednesday night, teach Bible study. If you come upstairs, you do. If you don't, do whatever you want. I'm going to go home, have dinner with my family. 7:15 came around. They were still downstairs. I left, got in my car, had dinner with my family. I get a call at 9:00. We've removed you from the pulpit for 2 weeks until you meet with us. I was like, well, are all the deacons, everybody there? They was like, yeah, everyone say. I said, good. I said, consider this my official resignation, effective immediately. And I said, you, brother deacon, can go to hell. And I hung up the phone and slept 9 hours.
Best sleep you've ever had, huh?
Oh man. I slept like a change-fed baby.
So what keeps you going and with the church and with religion and with God? I mean, obviously I don't think you put God in the same spectrum as church, because every church is different. Your teachings are different. So God is his own kind of thing. But what keeps you going is, I feel like everywhere you go, there's always these dramatic experiences and, each church you go to. So what kept you going and wanted to be a minister, wanted to be a pastor?
Because the calling outweighed God's children. And so what I mean by that is that they didn't call me, he did. That's my belief. And that he will equip me to get through some of these things that I'm going through. And the way he's equipped me is that, so without trying to sound spooky, is that he created a therapist that I get to speak to every week that helps me get through all of this stuff. Because sometimes we'll be ignorant and say, just pray about it. No. I'll pray, yes, but I also need someone to unload to. Because if I don't, either I'm going to hurt myself or hurt someone, and then no one is happy. But what really keeps me going is seeing those Christians that are empowered, that really do take what you say and make it applicable to their life. Because as I stated, there's a difference between church people and Christians. The church people, they may have been born in that church. They may do things around the church and sit on committees. But if your only goal is to get a title and to kind of use what people do as a weapon against them, then you can't be a Christian. You can't be a Christian deliberately trying to ruin people's marriages. You can't be a Christian spreading false rumors about your pastor and other individuals. That is not Christianity. That's not. Christianity is a love of God, a love of God's people, and doing your absolute best to treat folks the way you want to be treated and to try and show them a better way through your faith. Church folks just like to come, jump, shout, sit, whatever they want to do, then go home and talk about it. They have no solution. They have no impact. They have no vision. And those are the once you realize those people are really insignificant, you can keep going.
I think that leads me to one of my favorite sections and quotes from your book, because you go over a lot of people really kind of over spiritualize the aspect of God or what he has control of in terms of where he's guiding you. And I'll read from the book, you were like, the fact that I stink lets me know to take a shower. It's like, there are some things you just know to do. God shouldn't have to give you a sign to know it's time to do what is best for you.
Yeah.
And that definitely resonated with me too. Cause it's like, I can look up to God and be like, he's got somewhat of a plan for me. I'm going along. I know what I'm doing, but not everything is strictly like, hey, should I do this, God? Do I need to get this done now? What's going on?
Exactly. Yeah. We all have that mechanism inside of us that talks to us, that encourages us. Sometimes it's overshadowed by negativity, by tragedy and trauma. But if you kind of sit still and listen to yourself, you know what you need to do. And I knew I needed to remove myself from the toxic church culture. So you have some churches that really are doing their best. No church is perfect. No organization where people gather is perfect. But there is some that are really striving to be better. And those that are toxic, you got to remove yourself. Those that try to lord over you and try to have a dictatorship, instead of a regular relationship, you have to remove yourself from that. Because if you are dreading where you're going, but you keep going, then you're the issue. But one Sunday, I looked up, honest to God, I looked up and said, I can't stand none of you bastards. I said, I can't stand none of you. And I don't have a right to be here and preach to you when I can't stand 80% of you. I should leave. And 2 weeks later, that's really what happened. I was like, I couldn't stand the anger and the hatred that started to grow let me know I need to leave. Because generally, technically, that's not who I am. I'm a fun guy. I love to laugh. I love to love people. I love to enjoy people. And when I started to hate people, I said, I got to get out of here, and I need to take a step back. And that has been healthy for me. A lot of guys was like, well, man, you should stick it out. God will give you strength. I said, he has given me strength. He's given me strength to give them the keys so I could leave and they
I
could
know you
find.
mentioned that's one of those points where it's like,
Yeah,
am I doing this for me or am I just doing this to please others at this point?
exactly. And I was doing that for a long time, pleasing the pastor, pleasing the congregation, pleasing friends. I'm like, no, you guys are sleeping well. I'm the one that's getting up at 3 a.m. with panic attacks. You guys are not going through that. And so it was just important for me to remove myself so that I could start finally enjoying my wife and enjoying my children and then just enjoying my life, because they were a big part of the church. They were going with me. They were traveling with me. They were missing out on real dad time. Kim was missing out on real Lem time. And it was time for me to give myself to them now.
Were some of these moments also happening during Kim's own transition through different companies as well, and the struggles she was facing?
Yeah. Those were tough times where, she's struggling in corporate. I'm struggling in church. We don't know really how to communicate that well to one another, that we're both in pain. We're both going through, I'm drinking, she's drinking. Our two little ones are just kind of like looking at us while we're arguing. And, there was one point in 2019 where she stepped away from work and I stepped away from work, and we both were like, what have we just done? I said, we just freed ourselves. And we were like, what are we going to do? And then literally, some things happened. A good chunk of money came through, and I was able to clear up some bills, and we were able to live well until another assignment opened up. But sometimes, stepping away is scary. Also, in addition to that, stepping away could also bring you some success.
That's
For
awesome.
sure.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to say part of her motivation too, like mentioned in the book, was like, hey, I'm just going to keep writing it out because I'm doing this for the family, sticking this out for the family. I just keep on going.
Yeah. And that's what Kim was doing. Kim was doing that a lot, just trying to contribute her portion to the bills and to our lifestyle. And it was burning her out. She was getting gray and everything. She did not look like that young lady I met on the doorstep. And that made me sad. Now, man, she's skipping out of the house to the agency that we work at. Like literally every day we're collaborating, working, talking. Though we're in two separate buildings, we're always working together how we can make our agency better. And, we're enjoying that. And so we went through some rough patches, but I am really grateful to announce that we're doing better than what we were before.
That's awesome. Yeah, one of the last things I do want to go over is chapter 8 is going to be called "Why is Being Black So Difficult?"
Yeah.
So, tell me about some of the experiences that you faced from London, from New York, from Connecticut, all these places that you go into, the mistreating, the episodes, the physical, emotional, and mental stress and trauma that you guys went through as a family. Let's go ahead and talk about that and kind of how you dealt with it after dealing with everything you've already dealt with.
Yeah, so I really didn't experience too much racial injustice in London, but definitely in New York. Whenever I was profiled like so many times, I could literally I'm sitting at the light, and I'll just, how you just kind of like glance over, just looking around, observing your area, and you pull off, and then a cop spins around, and he comes up, he's like, "How you doing, Jamal?" And I look at him, I was like, I'm not Jamal. I was like, what the hell is wrong with you? And, when I think about it now, like, I probably would have been dead if this was like 2020, 2023. But this is, early 2000. And I'm just like, I'm not Jamal. Like, what are you talking about? And he like goes off on a rant. I show him my ID. And I literally cursed this cop out. Like, just get the hell out of my face. You're nothing but a racist. And he drives off. Another time I'm heading to church. I'm heading to church, driving on the Meadowbrook Parkway, and a cop, an Nassau County police car pulls up behind me, and I'm thinking I'm in the way. They're trying to get somewhere, so I signal, move over, and then they move behind me. I move again, then they get in front of me, slow down. They're playing all these games, then pull me over and ask me, "Have you been drinking?" And I forget I'm going to church. I'm like, have you been fucking drinking? I'm like, what the hell is wrong with you? You are harassing us as we're trying to go to church. And, she's like, oh, you need to calm down. I was like, no, you need to calm down. And we just go through that. And all of that, really created a lot of anger, a lot of rage. People think sometimes, that Black people are just angry or just loud. But when a lot of things have been suppressed, there is going to be a breaking point. And I think that is with any color of people, any culture, that if you keep on suppressing something, you're eventually going to blow. And
did you happen to experience some of this racism during like certain churches as well?
Yeah, in my last church here in San Diego, where I was, a lot of microaggression, a lot of racist terms. We were having dinner for an event, and one of the elders said to me, "Oh, sorry, Lem, we don't have any fried chicken." And I just kind of looked, and I swallowed it because we had just moved. I'm staying in the Airbnb. We don't have an apartment yet. So I just kind of like took it and kind of like walked off. But I was like, Lord, what the hell? I was like, I'm just trying to be a good dude. It's like I keep coming with this crap. And like I just, after a while, I had to leave. We did have some, lawyers involved and all that, but I just had to get out of that space. And
because I want to read some of the passages that you wrote when it comes into it. Everywhere we turn, we are faced with some sort of racism. Some white people call the police on us for simply doing our jobs. We could be in uniform making deliveries, and some random white person will have the audacity to ask us for identification. We are sitting in Starbucks having a business meeting, and it can be considered suspicious. And now we can be arrested for drinking coffee while Black. If we have fallen asleep because we've studied most of the night at a university study area, the police may question why we are there. We will be jogging down the street somewhere, they may throw a glass bottle at us. While we are bird watching in the park, someone may call the police and lie about us threatening them. Have you experienced any of that yourself?
Only one time at a restaurant. I've experienced that where we were gathering and the owners, so police didn't get involved, but some of the wait staff came up like, "How you boys doing today?" And kind of had that little country swang to it, and we just kind of looked at them and was like, who do you think you're talking to? And then the manager came over and was like, we don't want any trouble here. I was like, am I on a movie set? Am I being punked? Like, is this really happening? And, we were able to diffuse the situation, but it could have easily gotten out of hand. So many of the experiences that I wrote are what other folks have gone through. I have been fortunate that they have been minimal, but they could have escalated to something quite different where you guys won't even know who I am and I would be in a box. And that's unfortunate. Hope you were able to catch that
for a second.
Yeah.
One second.
Okay.
You there?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hear us?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, there
We're
we
back
are.
on. Okay, sweet. So,
Okay.
and the reason why I ask you is because I've seen it too. Like, the white. There's a spectrum of thinking there's not racism anymore, or it's died down, and there's not white superiority. And like, I've been in friends with. I remember one of my friends. He was a Black kid. He was driving. I was in the passenger seat. Cop pulls us over. Like, he immediately, it was a complete dick to him. And then he looked over and saw me, and he was like, you guys good? You good over there?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm good. All right, you guys have a good time," and just walked away. So it's like,
Right.
I see it, and it's so sad because being as a white person is it's like,
Mhm.
oh, like you can't say anything because you're white. And I was like, I completely understand the spectrum of what I can and cannot say, but it's like I
Yeah.
see this shit, and
Yeah.
I when I was reading it, I was like, I've been involved in that kind of stuff, with my
Yeah.
friends and people that I've worked with too. So it resonated to me, saying like, coming from your side, it wasn't about like, what a prick of a cop, he sucks, whatever. But you even said to yourself is like, this is how they were raised. This is how they look. This is that's where they're from, and you could have been, I think you were angry at the moment when it happened, but I think you
Yes.
kind of resonated going, oh, this is the world we live in. So what kind of, because there was another part that I wanted to specify, and it's, every day my mind is consumed with thoughts of what could happen to me, my wife, my two sons, and my only daughter. I get very upset when I see children who have had to live their lives had their lives cut short without having the opportunity to live. When
Mhm.
white people say to my two sons are handsome, I smile and I say thank you. But inside, I wonder if they think they are cute when they are 17 or 18. Will they think they are still cute when they are working out with me at the
Mhm.
gym and have gained some muscle? Will they think that they're cute and will consider them a threat because they have developed strong young Black men? I deal with this anxiety over my children's futures. I pray every day the Lord will keep them safe. Do you feel that, like, as in, the older they get, that I guess pre-notion of, oh, they're cute now, but when they get older, we know they're going to be a thug, we know they're going to have they have their own notions of who they're going to be? How do you
Yeah.
deal with that, as in like teaching them, going, this is the world we're living, don't succumb to it, don't fall under it, try to
Mhm.
find a way to get out of it, or try to change the world around you as itself?
Yeah, and so some of my older two have been dealing with some microaggressions in school. However, I do share with them how to try and navigate through this world. I'm it's probably an advantage or a disadvantage, but I try to keep them a little sheltered. But they have those phones, so they see what has happened to George Floyd. They have seen what has happened to the brother down in Memphis. And so there's so many that you cannot name, but they've seen Kim and I sit on the couch, like literally weep when we saw the police officer had his knee on George's neck. And so we share with them that not all police are like that. Not all white people are like that, because just like people think, all Black people are this, they're loud, they're thugs, they're criminals, they don't want to educate themselves. That is not true. And so I share with them that you have to be smart. You have to be calm. Don't take every page out of Dad's book. Dad is an adult, so he can maneuver a little differently. Sometimes you kind of have to swallow some things that you don't want to, and then you need to tell me. And I'll give you an example. A little girl told my daughter two things. One, that called her a nigger, and then two, she was like, "My mom is prettier than yours because she's lighter." And my daughter has been struggling in school, not with her education, but just with interaction with other children. And so the principal kind of calls me up if Sasha has to defend herself. And I thought to myself, well, how is it that you never call me when my daughter is dealing with all of these microaggressions? And I went to the school and I was like, what you're doing is wrong. And you need to have systems in place to teach about these racial slurs, these words that we use. And I said, whenever anyone uses the N word, I was like, historically in present day, violence is going to follow. because you were really enraged to kind of use that. And I said, you didn't call me on that. I called you on it. And you haven't done anything to protect my child. And that is an issue. And I share with my daughter that I'm going to protect you. I'm going to be there for you. I'm not going to be there always, unfortunately. But these are the steps that you have to do to take care of yourself. You have to be able to articulate what you are feeling, share that, take documentation. And I'm telling this to a 10-year-old.
Yeah,
But
right.
she is, those are the things that we have to do. And many times it's just disturbing, it's heartbreaking. But I share with them as much as I can, as much as they're able to digest, and then we move from there.
That's perfect, man. Thank you so much. We're going to wrap up the episode. I do want to ask a question I usually ask all of my guests is, who inspires you to keep going forward, to keep trying to teach, to keep God in your life, to keep church in your life, to keep your family, not succumbing to all the trauma that you went to? Who inspires you on your journey to be the best person you can be?
Wow, I'm going to give you someone that is living, someone that's dead, and someone that's living. So I have become a James Baldwin fan, and I love everything James Baldwin. And I see all the things that he has gone through, especially when he, shared about being in love with the same gender, what he went through in ministry, what he went through with his stepfather, and just in life. And yet he still kept, pushing forward. He never gave up. He wrote over 17 novels, published articles and essays, and just never stopped. He did his absolute best until he couldn't move anymore, until when he passed in the late 80s. And then someone that is living, I really admire Dr. Michael Eric Dyson. Another author and commentator, and he's just another person that has a degree in sociology, a lecturer, a theologian. He's a minister, and he got put out of his first church, and he shares that story, but he keeps maximizing his opportunities. He keeps delivering on time. He keeps empowering his students at the university, and I take that as inspiration. As I said before, I look at how far I've come and all the things that I was able to get through, and that becomes a part of my inspiration. When I see my family, my children, my wife, and when I see all the things that I'm accomplishing now, that inspires me. That gives me the fire that I need to keep going. That I really could have been dead. I could have been in a mental institution. I could have been a homeless person on the street dealing with trauma. But yet I get up and I'm intentional about my day, 5 a.m., meditation, reading, study, then I'm helping Kim get the kids ready. And that's what gives me inspiration, those things.
That's awesome.
That's perfect. What do you got going on ahead of time? You got anything planned for the book?
Yeah, so I'm going to be in Bridgeport, Connecticut. As much as I try and stay away from church, it keeps calling me back. But I'm going to be at Messiah Baptist Church in Bridgeport, Connecticut, on Sunday, April 30th, sharing about trauma. Then Saturday, May the 6th, I'm going to be in Oceanside, California, at a mental health festival. So I'll be sharing there from 11 a.m. to 4. And then I'll be at another trauma conference, May 12th, at the Trumbull Marriott in Trumbull, Connecticut, sharing about trauma. And that's from 9 to 4 on May the 12th.
Help. I'm dealing with trauma, real talk, real encouragement, and real healing. It's a phenomenal book. I do recommend anybody on every level to read it, whether if it's a religious experience, whether if you believe or don't believe in God. But if you're going through trauma, which is 99% of people that I know has gone through some way, shape, or trauma, and seeing it from a different perspective and how someone else handles it is a real encouragement on its own. So I want to say it was a joyful conversation we had with you. I admire you in a lot of ways because you handle it a lot differently than I would have. I'd probably be in jail right now, but you did such an amazing job in telling your story without, like you said it many times, without sounding weird or superstitious about, certain things churchy wise, but you did a very basic, very mundane, very simple way of telling a story at such a high regard. So I appreciate you coming out here and telling your story in person.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you guys. And this has been wonderful. And I pray continued success for your podcast.
Appreciate you.
Thank you very much, buddy. Lemuel, if you ever plan on coming in, I'd love to have you back on in your next book when you read it. I'd love to see what happened and what kind of other, I don't know if hopefully you don't go through too much more trauma. Hopefully it's a positive book.
It's like a whole nother trauma
still
book.
Read it. But huge fan. And I'd love to have you back on anytime you like to. Okay, buddy?
Where can
Thank you
people
so
find
much.
you?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Where can people find you if they want to look you up?
So on Instagram, Lem_loyal, and Facebook, Lemuel RT Blackett, and the same for Twitter and LinkedIn.
Perfect. Thank you so much, buddy. Have a good day, and I look forward to hearing from you soon.
Thank you. Take care.